Hello and welcome to the episode 10 of the Developers Zen podcast, where we talk about everything in the games industry, but from the eyes of two indie devs. My name is Siavash, aka Rainy, and my co-host is Sydney, aka Fem. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Developers Zen podcast. This is in our series of How to Indie, where we share our experiences with being an indie developer, team, studio, and the lessons that we've learned that you could learn from yourself for your own indie adventure. So today's topic, we are actually going to kind of summarize or bring together all this stuff that we had discussed in the previous How to Indie episodes into one place, which is an interesting one because it's a step you need to do as an indie dev as well if you are going to share your game idea with other people. And it is how to create a pitch deck, or
how to pitch your game.
Your game properly. I have experiences with this that I wish I had done differently, but when SunnySide went on a Kickstarter and was successful, I was contacted by a bunch of publishers, some really big ones, and I did have to put together a pitch deck pretty quickly to present to them while I was on the call. And I didn't end up using that pitch a lot because the person who was interviewing me told me that, hey, can we just talk instead of this presentation thing? Because the presentation wasn't good. That was a weird one too, but the presentation wasn't that good either. It was just a bunch of lists.
And I remember the actual pitch deck you and I ended up building together.
Yeah.
And that's the one that we sent out. But that's kind of what I want to talk about is all the different types of pitches that you might have to do and what are they and what's the purpose. So let's start with just what is a pitch? What's the purpose of a pitch?
Yeah.
And the purpose of the pitch is you're trying to get somebody to give you money to make your game. That's what it's for. So it might be a Kickstarter campaign, it could be publishers, it could be investors, it could be your mom because you want her to give you money to make a game. It could be anybody. It could be convincing your girlfriend to support you for the next 5 years while you make a game. It could be anything. I love calling out Eric Baroni. Sorry, dude.
We need to have him as a guest.
Nothing but respect.
That'll be great.
That'll be great.
I'd love that.
But that's kind of the idea. Is how do you convince somebody that this crazy idea of yours is actually worth investing money into? That's the whole point. So there are kind of specific things that you want to talk about. Now, I think we could talk about the Kickstarter pitch because you did it. And I actually didn't write this down in the outline, but I'm putting you on the spot. Yeah. You did the Kickstarter pitch.
So are we talking about
and yours was pretty successful, I think. It got me.
So we're talking about the Kickstarter itself, not the PDF, not the presentation I made for the publishers that wanted to talk to me.
No, because Kickstarter inherently is a pitch.
Yeah.
Right? You're trying to convince the masses that you are not only going to make a game and not only make a good game, but that you're going to actually do it and they're going to enjoy it and they should spend money on it. So when you sat down to do your pitch for Kickstarter, did you do the video first?
So,
did you what did you do? Because you made the mistake of not doing pre-production first.
Yeah.
So I think here's the first thing: do pre-production before you do any of this, and we're gonna have a whole
series
on pre-production and why it's important. But assuming you've done all of your pre-production for your game, now it's time to pitch it. So what does it look like?
So the first step, honestly, was to have a look at other Kickstarter campaigns and see how they had kind of put it together, how they have laid it all out, and also having a chat with other Kickstarter...
Specifically successful campaigns. Yes.
And also chatting with few people who had run Kickstarter campaigns that were also successful and asking how they approached it and how they did it. Essentially, it kind of, like you said, it's very similar to how to put together a presentation for a publisher or an investor of some kind, where you want to lay out the unique selling points of the game, core gameplay mechanics of why we're making the game, what the game's about, and what makes it unique. So with Kickstarter, it comes with a difference that you have to convince people to spend money on it, to tell them that, hey, this game is worth spending money on. Now, I had the luxury of working in a marketing team before this, which meant that I could create really pretty and professional looking assets to put in the page. And I think that's a pretty important thing in your pitch as well.
Yeah.
Like how it's put together visually is going to kind of define how, and it kind of sucks, but it's the truth, sadly, how serious they're going to take you. Is sometimes how well your pitch looks. Unless you have a game out there that is already very successful, if it's something that nobody's seen before, they're going to judge you on how it is presented. So with Kickstarter, that's even more so. That's amplified because it's not professionals looking at your game, it's just normal gamers looking at your game.
But like, how did you decide like what categories to like put together? Because I mean, I probably should have pulled up. I didn't mean to talk about the Kickstarter, but yeah, let's talk about our Kickstarter.
Yeah, so honestly, I had the luxury of kind of having more of an internal kind of overview of the game for myself. So the game always had like 4 different aspects to it: exploration, social, animals, and then farming. So kind of covering those bases gave me a nice little draft, I guess, to work on. And it took about 2 weeks to put together because I kept going and building on top of it. But I guess the best way to start making one is to have a skeleton with the titles and the headlines.
Right.
I see a lot of people, and I struggle with this myself, writing something from the beginning. So I always struggle with the beginning of something. I always know the middle or the end. So it doesn't matter, just start writing the middle or the end. Yeah. And then you are going to go back and complete the beginning and the starting points.
Now, I think, looking at the Kickstarter, I think a lot of the stuff that went into the Kickstarter is similar to what would go into just a pitch deck. So I think we can just kind of talk about the pitch deck and then have you relate it back to, this is what you, I'll talk about what you put in the pitch deck, and then you can relate it to, this is how I did that, but in the Kickstarter.
Yep.
That work?
Sure, sounds good.
So, okay, so what is a pitch deck? So the pitch deck itself is like the presentation. So they come in a lot of different forms. Like we said, Kickstarter. A common one is to just make like a PowerPoint presentation. The beauty of a PowerPoint is that you can just email it to somebody. You don't have to sit down and present it. You can export it in a way that you could just go through the presentation. And I would say whatever your pitch deck is, you need to build it in a way that it can be consumed that way. Like, don't expect that you're going to be there to explain everything, because you're not going to, it's just not going to happen. It needs to be something that you can send off. It's going to speak for itself, and it's not reliant on you to like expound upon. So, you know, the other benefit of doing like a PowerPoint presentation is, like I said, you can email blast it to publishers. You can then take it with you to events that you might do, which we'll talk about, like how to spread your pitch deck and stuff. But, you know, ours is a PowerPoint presentation. And I think it's pretty good. I think we could have done a couple things better, but it's actually a pretty good pitch deck. So how do you want to like lay it out, right? It's presentation. So the first thing to kind of keep in mind is it needs to be short and direct and to the point, and you need to get across all the important information that's going to convince somebody to give you money. So you want to grab them with that first slide, right? That's going to be like the most important thing. So for ours is a visual, right? It's like the backdrop of ours was like the game itself, because our game is beautiful, and then the logo. Now, do whatever works for you in your game. So if you have some really pretty like 2D art, make that your title slide, or you could use the logo, or you could use like maybe a specific mechanic as the background, like whatever works for you. For us, one of the huge selling points for our game is the environment, so that's the title slide for us. But the title slide needs to be something they're going to be able to look at and go, oh, okay, like I know what I'm getting into. So,
and that also means that you, especially if you're going to approach it from this angle, that means that you are going to need to have some stuff established by this point before you can even do this.
Yeah, which again, pre-production is very important. So the next thing that you're going to want to do is again, you want to hook them as fast as possible. So you want your next slide after your title to be like your summary. here's the stuff that we're going to talk about. Here's the stuff that we're like, this is my game.
Yeah, you want an elevator
in a short
pitch.
Little sweet elevator pitch. Yeah.
As your second
so,
pitch, yeah.
Think of it also as like, what are you going to put in your like Steam caption for like your Steam page? Like it should kind of, that's it. If you have, for anybody who doesn't know what an elevator pitch is, the idea is that you just got an elevator with somebody who's like really important, and you have an elevator ride amount of time to explain to them what it is that you need to explain to them. That's the elevator pitch. So you have that short, quick amount of time to sell them on an idea. So our elevator pitch has actually changed a few times. I think it's now the best that it's ever been. But
and you can also check it out on Steam descriptions.
Yeah, is our current one. Yeah. So, and look at other people's elevator pitches too. Honestly, it helps a lot. So our elevator pitch from this is our first slide on our pitch deck, and it's obviously different now, but ours was a JRPG farming life simulation developed in Unreal Engine 4. Focus on modernizing the classic farming genre by bridging the gap between tradition and technology, while also highlighting human individuality and harmony. It's actually not that different. We kept that for a long time, but that's kind of that's our game. That's SunnySide.
That you can pull out from there.
Yeah.
It tells you that it's an Unreal Engine. It tells you the genre. It tells you what the focuses are going to be, what the unique selling points are going to be, and it also tells you what is the long-term goal of the story. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, you know, there are a lot of different things that you can work into that. You want to make sure you're putting in the important information, but don't put in so much information that's like suddenly too much.
Yeah.
So, and it's something you might have to rewrite over and over and over and over.
And you have to choose. You can't have everything in there. You have to sacrifice.
It's the most important things, which is actually the next thing to talk about, which is what your unique selling points are going to be. So this is kind of a phrase you'll hear in the industry. It's your USPs, your unique selling points. What is it about your project, in this case your game, that's going to make you different and unique compared to all the other games that are out there? What are the mechanics that you're focusing on? And so for ours, it was kind of laid out as like, here's the introduction to like what our game is about, and then it was broken down into like, here's the key features. You could probably present it in any way that you want. It's generally better to start with like something that summarizes and then expound upon that. So for ours, it's like the introduction. We have, for us, it looks like we focus more on like the social stuff, and then like modernizing farming. Those were like our two main focal points.
Yeah, which honestly is still the case.
It stayed that way. Yeah. And then we kind of continued on into the features. So our features that we talked about were realistic and engaging farming, player agency and customization, rich player independent social interactions, and the smartphones, which honestly did maintain. And then we also did cooking and combat. So ours had quite a lot. We have 3 slides about our USPs. And we put GIFs in ours too, which highly recommend putting GIFs of like gameplay. If you're at that point where you should have something that you can show, definitely put GIFs in your pitch, because it's, people love that stuff.
Yeah. I guess you can treat it like your Steam page. You want GIFs there for people to see. You want GIFs in your pitch deck for the other publishers to see, investors to see.
Yeah, and take the time to explain, like, you know, here's my game, here's the unique. Now, you don't need to explain every single mechanic that's going to go into your game. That's not important for a pitch deck. What's important is just those small things of like what sets us apart. Now, for a farming game, our main thing was that we want to focus on like modernizing the genre, but that wasn't just like adding technology. That was, we want to modernize every aspect of it. So that's why that was one of our USPs. But like, we didn't put drone racing in there. No, you know, the drone never came up in our pitch because it wasn't, I mean, it is a unique selling point, but it wasn't something that we felt would like capture somebody.
Yeah.
You know, so
actually, funny enough, I don't think the drone is even in the Steam page as one of the GIFs or something. There is a build mode photo, but it doesn't say that it's done through a demo.
Yeah, the only time we talked about The only time we talked about the drone was for build mode, yeah. So, you know, if your art style is one of your unique selling points, talk about the art style. If, you know, if you're making a roguelite and you're, you know, doing some kind of mechanic that's different, talk about that. If you're making a, I don't know, a platformer, talk about like your unique jumping mechanic, or talk about whatever it is that you feel like is what's setting your game apart. That's the thing that you really want to focus on in your pitch deck. So, and you can take a few slides to talk about this stuff, but don't take too many. There is such thing as a pitch deck that's way too long, and I'm gonna probably say this general
Well, that was the very first one that I made, that we
times.
don't even have it anymore, which was the one that I presented to the potential publishers at the time.
Yeah, we don't even have it anymore.
And yeah, I'm gonna see if I can dig it up, but yeah, that's, yeah.
This is just way too long.
It was just way too long, it was way
Yeah.
too many information, and
Yeah,
it was also visually
too
not very
much.
interesting, it was just text, so.
yeah. So, you know, keep it interesting, keep it compelling, but keep it short, because, you know, whoever it is who's looking at this, whether it's from an email or if you do have the ability to sit down in a meeting, time is going to be very limited. For the person who's sitting down to look at your pitch, they're only going to look at the first couple of slides before they decide to keep clicking.
Yeah.
Honestly.
It's,
You know, so
you
if you
can
don't
treat it
grab
like a
them in the
YouTube
first
video,
couple...
I guess.
Really, yeah. You really can. So, yeah, so take maybe 5 slides tops to, like, explain your game. Even that might be a bit too much. The only reason ours is 5 is because our information is huge. So, like, we have, like, 2 points per slide. So, we have, you know, it's not a ton. It's just we decided to go with very large graphics and stuff so that it's not, you don't have to dig for it, basically. So yeah, so take some time to explain that stuff. The next thing after unique selling points is you want to talk about, like, okay, how long is this going to take? So once they've decided, okay, this is what this game kind of looks like, you now need to show that you know what you're doing and you're prepared. That's kind of the next point. Show that you have a good idea that's worth giving money for, and then show that you're trustworthy to give that money to. That's the point of the pitch deck. So once you've established what the money is for, now you can establish that you can be trusted. And the way to establish that you can be trusted is by showing that you've put the thought into the pre-production, how all of this stuff is going to come together. So the first part of that is your timeline. What is your timeline? You can't just say, oh, it's going to take me 3 years. You need to be fairly specific. Our timeline was not good, honestly.
No.
And that was probably the first thing I would have redone. The more specific you can make your timeline without, like, drowning in the details, the better off you're going to be. You found it, didn't you? You've got this shit-eating grin on your face.
Hey, I did find it. I'll send it to you.
Send it to me. I want to see this.
Yeah.
You know, so for our timeline, we just talked about, like, when we want to release different things. Like, when we wanted our Steam page to go up, when we were going to give access to, like, to Kickstarter or BackerKit, or when we wanted releases. That was the only timeline we did, and honestly, it was not good. We also had, like, planned DLCs in there, too, which was also very dumb.
Do we want to say what our
again...
planned release was back then?
No, because everybody knows.
Yeah.
Everybody knows we didn't meet our timeline. But if I could go back and do it, what it would be is, like, here are the key features of the game that need to be developed. Here's how long we think they're going to take. And here's, like, what those milestones look like. That's what your timeline needs to look like. It needs to basically be your roadmap of production.
Now, Sunny, what is a milestone?
Which is why pre-production is important. A milestone are, like, major developmental milestones that you'll hit. So it's like, you know, implementing a mechanic can be a milestone, or reaching a point of completion on a mechanic can be a milestone,
like all the
or
characters are finished
content, yeah, creating the characters, or the writing, or having the script finished. There's different types of milestones, and you need to know as the game developer how long all of those things are potentially going to take. And that's why pre-production is probably the hardest part, because you have to make a lot of guesses. And we talked about in the last How to Indie video of, like, how to figure out the budget for all this stuff, and it all kind of goes together. You need to sit down and figure all this stuff out, because you need to know what it's going to cost, and you need to give yourself padding in your timeline. If you think it's going to take 3 months to do something, give yourself 6 and then add an extra month on for padding. So there's a lot of different, things that you need to consider. And so when you pitch your timeline, you want to have that padded pitch. Don't go too far into it. Don't say I think it's going to take 3 months and then say it's going to take a year. That's a bit excessive. But definitely give yourself that extra bit of wiggle room and it should be on like a micro level. So if you have a mechanic that you think is going to take you a week to implement, give yourself 2. If you have a mechanic that you think is going to take a month, give yourself 2. So that you have that time to, in case anything comes up, If you think it's going to take an hour, give yourself maybe 3 hours. So don't just always double it. Kind of be smart about where do I think it could go wrong. And so when you go to do your timeline, you don't need all the tiny stuff, but it would be smart to say, this mechanic will be done at this point in time, and this mechanic at this point, and full completion on the story by this point, and script delivery at this point, and show, I think it's going to take us a year to get this done, or 2 years, or 3 years, or whatever, so that you can figure out the next part, which is pitching your budget, which is the heart of the pitch, right?
Yeah.
It's how much money you need. Yeah. So for Kickstarter, you definitely had to implement the unique selling points, right?
Yeah.
I don't think you had any kind of like timeline milestone thing.
No. I had a release date in mind, but that's when the game scope
that got thrown out the window.
Different. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the amount, like if the question is what the amount for Kickstarter, I pretty much answered it in the previous one. It was what was my own rate for paying rent and paying bills and keeping the lights on and eating food.
Now, if you had factored in your artists that you were going to need, then would have been very different. Yeah. Would have been very different. Yeah. So that's something to consider too, is really what the next part of it. So we've got explain your game, your unique selling points as part of explaining your game, and then your next couple slides, really could do one slide for timeline, a slide for budget, and you'll want to break down like where your budget's going to go. So you can't just say, I think it's going to be $30,000 a month for 5 months, and so we need this cost. You kind of want to explain, well, where's all that money going? And there's a common term in the industry, which is your monthly burn rate. What is your monthly burn? How much money are you spending per month in order to get your game made? And the money you're spending is who you're spending it on, right? And there might be some other things factored into your burn rate, and if there are, you want to account for them. So if you're paying for Dropbox or Google or some kind of production software, if you're paying for Perforce, or if you're paying for GitHub, or if you're paying for you want to factor that in, sound libraries, you're going to want to factor that into your burn rate, because that's something you're going to have to spend money on every month.
And I do have a little parenthesis here quick that about Kickstarter specifically, is that if you get a lot more funding that you asked for, you don't have to increase the scope of your game. Save it.
God, please don't.
I don't know. Pay yourself more. Spend more money on marketing. You don't have to increase the scale because the game got a lot more.
I wouldn't even say you don't have to. I would say don't.
Just don't. Yeah.
Don't do it. People want stretch goals, and people want new things to get towards, and yes, it's going to help you make money, but it's so much harder, because if you did not factor those into your original pre-production and your original scope, it's going to mess with your entire timeline. So don't think about DLCs. Don't be thinking about ways to expand. Like, if you want your extended milestone for Kickstarter, what your stretch goal, make it, we're gonna go to PAX West or something. Make it like, we're gonna go to an event, or we're gonna give you guys, time with, like, make it actual rewards for the community that you can achieve without
Unless
needing
it's
the
something
money.
you planned for,
Yeah.
just don't do it. Like if you had planned a full-featured game and then you had to cut it to a smaller bite size for Kickstarter, that's cool. That's actually a very good way to approach it. But don't do it the other way around and try to tack things on top. Yeah.
We didn't think we could afford this, but if we get this much, we think we could do it. That's fine, but don't like add extra crap. But so for back to monthly burn rate. So factor in the things that you need to spend money on, and then you need to factor in the salary for all your employees. So you need to figure out who you're going to pay how much per month for whatever, and show that in this pitch deck. Show where the money is going to go and who is going to go to. So like for ours, we broke it down in like this really cool little like wheel of like, here's all the different people we think we need to hire, and here's how much of the budget we're going to give to them. We didn't give an actual amount because we didn't know what people would want to be hired for, but we kind of gave a range of what we thought it was going to cost. So, you know, do a slide of like, here's the money, here's what our monthly burn rate's going to be, and then here's what our total cost is going to be with that monthly burn rate applied to our timeline. That's basically what you need to put together. And then we also put in a slide for what our current team looked like. I think that's a smart thing to do.
That is,
you kind of want to show,
is a bit of a requirement, honestly, from a
makes
lot
sense,
of investors.
Because I mean, if you're a solo developer, it's just you.
Yeah.
But yeah, put anybody who is on your team, or who you want to be on your team, or who you know, if you have people waiting in the wings to be hired, write that down. You know, we have them. They just are waiting for us to get funding, because that might happen, honestly. You know, so put your team down. You don't need to do anything fancy. A picture is nice. People always like to see pictures of the people that are going to be working on the game. It's not necessary. I think a couple of the people in our pitch deck had like graphics they'd drawn for themselves.
Yeah.
So you can definitely do that. It's kind of a common thing for game developers, actually, where like everybody's like personified as a little cartoon character. That's cool, you know. But it kind of helps. It helps like humanize you, I think.
Yeah.
And your team
also builds trust, because
trust.
It can be a situation where, you know, somebody might assume that they're not even real people and you're just trying to pad the size of your studio.
Yeah, so yeah, definitely, you know, it again, if I could go back, I would probably put in like links to their art stations and stuff, so that the publisher could see like, here's what they're capable of, or other games that they've worked on, or maybe what school that they went to if they got a degree in game design or something. So you don't need like a bio for every person, but, you know, say who they are. If you're like us, you're an international team, you can say where they're at, what their role is, you know, a picture of them, their experience, stuff like that. So, and then, you know, also put in, you know, here's people we have, and then here's the roles that we still need to fill. So, like, you could do that in a cute way where you have, like, blank pictures, like a question mark, like, need to fill, so that they see, like, you still need to build out this team. Probably how I would have done it, looking back on it. Yeah. Because we definitely didn't do that. And then at that point, you've kind of given all the information you need to give, and you can wrap it up with, like, a closer, right? So for our closer, it was like, you know, well, no, there's one more. Not the closer. The last thing you need to do is, why do you want the funding in the first place? What do you?
Because the thing is, they are going to ask that question, so you might as well answer it.
You might as well answer it ahead of time. So, like, what do you? If it's for a publisher, what do you expect from the publisher? Do you want just straight funding? Do you want porting abilities? Do you want marketing? Do you want access to game developer shows and conferences? Do you want localization? Do you want to be purchased? Do you want your studio to be bought? Do you want to give them IP rights? Do you want to give them, I don't know, there's a whole lot of avenues and routes that you can take with a publisher, and so you kind of want to have an idea of that up front. Are you looking for merchandising for your game? Like, what are the things that you really want to achieve, and how can the publisher give those to you? So you'll want a slide that kind of talks about that. Ours is a bit more of a bullet point, where we were like, we want funding, we want localization, we want porting, we want marketing. Those are the things that we wanted. We probably should put merchandising in there because it was something we wanted.
Yeah.
But like, if you're not willing to give up IP, put that in your pitch deck, because that is something that will break down communication and break down negotiations if you don't tell them up front. Because some studios are looking, well, a lot of publishers are looking to own IP now. If you're willing to give up your IP, or you're willing to sell a share of your IP, put that in there. Hey, we're willing to give you so much of ownership over the intellectual property in exchange. Make sure you talk with a lawyer about that first, though.
The art of it is that all of this information that we mentioned, you need to keep it short, because you need to think about, especially if this is to a publisher, you need to think about that the scout that is looking at this pitch deck of yours, if it is showing it to a scout, they're going through a lot of these. You can kind of almost treat it as a CV or a resume. And so what would you do for your resume to stand out? You want to do that for your pitch deck, but also making sure it's brief enough that they don't just see the scale of it and they just don't even bother looking. And at some point, whoever's looking at it is going to zone out. So make sure that all of the information is concise and is given to them as early as possible to get there.
As quickly as possible too,
We need to wrap it up for our normal version of the podcast. So is there anything else that you want to share?
Yeah, so at that point, I think the last like slide that you really want is like the summary. Is, what is your genre? What's your target audience? What's your, like, is this a multiplayer game or is this a single person game? Is it an RPG? Is it, so like the kind of gist of it, and then you want like a target release date. You want
target audience, like you said.
Target audience. What platforms do you think? So kind of like, here's our little overview. It's the miniature pitch deck that like explains the game.
Kind of imagine how when you Google a game, you see the card at the right side shows up with all the information. You kind of want that, really.
You kind of want that, so that if they do just kind of skip all of it and go to the last slide, which honestly they might, they at least get like a TLDR at the end, which is what you want. So make sure you have that. But yeah, I think the last thing that I would like really want to say is, now that you have the pitch deck, what do you do with it? So what we did is we found publishers that we wanted to work with. There's always going to be something on their website that's like, pitch us your game, and they'll tell you how to do it. And you just kind of send up an email with a pitch deck usually, and some kind of like, it's like filling out an application, and then you just kind of drop the pitch deck in there. Bonus points if you have a trailer already. That's going to help out a lot. Which we'd had quite
extra bonus points if you have a demo or a little playable thing.
And they're probably going to ask for it usually. And once you get into the conversation, they'll ask for a demo. But the other thing I kind of want to point out is, if you are making a pitch deck and you're lost or you're confused, reach out to the industry. Like, most of the industry believes in helping the next person in line. Most of us believe in mentoring people. So look for networking groups. If you want to be in the industry, join the IGDA. It's the International Game Developers Association. Join the IGDA groups. You don't have to pay money to like join the Discord. If you want access to more stuff, it's like $5. It's not expensive. Join networking groups. Look for networking groups for game developers in your area or online. Or, if there's an indie company that you like have a lot of respect for, email them and say, hey, I'm an indie game developer. I'm looking to build my pitch deck. Do you have any advice for me? You might get a response, so reach out to us, send us an email. I'll help you. I've
put a
it
comment
happens
on
all
this
the time,
video
actually.
if you're watching on YouTube.
Comment, so definitely reach out to the people who can support you. You're not in this alone. Everybody's been through it, and we're all looking to help the next guy. So don't think that it's like this insurmountable task. Like, it's going to take a bit, and it's hard, and the pre-prod and the pitch deck and all that stuff, it's a process, and, let people help you with it.
You'd be surprised how far you get by just asking in this industry.
Oh my god, so far.
I can't say that enough. But with that, thank you so much for listening to that didn't come through. I hope it didn't come through.
Okay, good.
Thank you so much for listening to the 10th episode of the Developers Zen podcast. We are going to have an extended version of this right after this, where we are actually going to look at the old SunnySide pitch. I'm going to send it to Sydney, and we're going to have a live reaction. It's not that bad, honestly. So if you do want to catch that, we have a Patreon down in the description where you can support us with as little as $5, I think is our smallest tier. And you get early access to all of our
extended podcasts, I think is... Yeah, so early access is $5. I think $10 is the extended version.
The extended one,
not that bad.
Yeah, and you get these episodes earlier if you would like to do that.
And you can back out anytime you want.
You can back out anytime you want.
Honestly. So you can support us for a month with $10, absorb all the content, and then quit.
Download all the podcasts, archive it on your PC. I don't care. And then we also have a Discord currently centered around our upcoming game SunnySide that you can join, but it is a RainyGames Discord server. So whatever future project we work on will be on there too.
We'll end up in there.
We also have a Twitter at PlaySunnySide and at RainyGames that you can follow. And with that, we will see you.
We also have Instagram and TikTok. And we're going to start posting on TikTok more soon. I just need to get my life together. I
forget that we even have that. But with that, we'll say goodbye to you. Next week, we are going to be talking about current events in the industry. So we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye, guys.